What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What is going on, guys? It's week 9 cashing points. Happy Halloween. Happy 11-game slate to those who celebrate. This is a really fun one. Got a lot of high totals, a lot of close spreads as well. I'm here with Grant Barfield, Ryan Heath to talk through every game. On the main slate, started off the Minnesota Vikings at the Detroit Lions. This is not one of those tight spreads. Vikings are 8.5-point dogs. Total here is 48.5. On the injury front, both Vikings starting tackles, Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill, are questionable. Graham, start off with the Lions side here. This is one of those classic Jared Goff spots. Huge favorite at home, massive implied team total. Quarterback ownership looks pretty spread out, and it also doesn't look like it's going to concentrate much at all on Jared Goff. I'm seeing between 2 and 4% projected ownership on Goff across the industry. This feels like a really great week to just onslaught stack the Lions, right?
Yeah, definitely. Anytime Goff is a favorite, especially at home, he's just a really strong play. And I think you kind of nailed it. This is a wide open week, and Goff is right now projecting for sub 5%, which is a lot of fun. You look at the last 4 seasons, Goff is averaging 20.7 fantasy points per game in his 38 starts as a favorite. That dips to like 14 points per game when he's a dog. And he's just crushed the Vikings too. Like, I typically don't care too much about production versus, other teams, over a 2 or 3 game sample, but we've got like a 5 or 6 game sample where Goff has just like crushed Brian Flores, crushed this blitz. Lions have scored 30 or more points in 5 straight meetings against the Vikings, and Goff is once again crushing the blitz. According to our fantasy points data, he's averaging nearly 11 yards per pass attempt when blitzed. So I do wonder if Flores kind of learns from this and plays a little more coverage this week. But I think Goff is my favorite tournament quarterback this week for pretty obvious reasons. I mean, Gibbs and Amon-Ra project extremely well, and Goff is 6K. He's kind of like wedged in between some of the cheaper quarterbacks we'll talk about and these high-priced guys who are also at good spots.
Yeah, I think the 2 guys that really stand out to me as tournament quarterbacks, where I just want to get as many pieces of their team as I can, are Goff and Daniel Jones here. Ryan, curious what you're seeing on the line side of this game. I think my favorite way to stack up Goff is to do 2 of, or maybe even all 3 of, Gibbs, Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta. JMO kind of seems like the odd man out. If you're playing a lot of Goff, I do think you can work him in, but I'm curious what you think here.
Yeah, that's exactly how I see it, and that's exactly how kind of the schematic matchup sees it. So, yes, as Graham mentioned, Goff destroys the blitz. He's also destroyed too high this year, which the Vikings do the most in the league. 8.4 adjusted net yards per attempt against too high. And we see when Goff faces those looks, he throws to Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's been worth a 41% boost to his yards per out run. For Laporta, been worth a 59% target per out run boost. Too high, that is. Leads all tight ends in yards per out run against those looks. So, yeah, St. Brown Laporta is going to be my favorite double stack. You can definitely throw Jahmyr Gibbs in there. We've seen him kind of take on more of the workload in this backfield over the past 2 weeks. Over the full season, he has been the guy they go to, at least when the games are competitive and when they're trying to put up points. It seems like Gibbs is the guy they give the ball to. So that's what I'd like to lean into from an upside perspective. And yeah, man, I just can't get on to Jameson Williams. Like, he is just not targeted whatsoever against too high, below a 10% target share against too high looks. I understand that they have been saying all week that they want to get him involved and throw him the ball, but I feel like they say this about Jameson Williams in 50% of weeks that he's so amazing and they really want to get him the ball. Do wonder if it's a motivation thing for him, if that's more of a coaching technique than anything we should be reading into. But yeah, I can't get to JMO. Love the rest of them. Gibbs even works as either a one-off play or in a mini stack as well.
Yeah, this is a great running back slate. Currently we have Jahmyr Gibbs at 14% projected ownership. Honestly, I'd be pretty surprised if he ended up that high. I think he's one of those guys that's going to get pinched. I think a lot of people are going to pay down to some of the high projected values and then try to pay up for a Christian McCaffrey. Jahmyr Gibbs is sort of one of the best off the board running back plays on the slate. Only other guy that I wanted to throw out on the Lions side is David Montgomery. He's at 58% of backfield expected fantasy points when the Lions are leading by multiple scores. So if this does end up being a blowout, he's a guy who could push for maybe 20, 25 DK. He's another guy that I might want to work into some Jared Goff onslaught stacks. Ryan, Vikings side of this game I think is also pretty interesting. You know, as cheap quarterbacks go, J.J. McCarthy projects well, but he's not going to garner much ownership. I think people would rather play Mac Jones and certainly would rather play Jackson Dart this week. I'm curious what you think of McCarthy and the Vikings passing attack. I don't necessarily think you need a run back on your Lion stacks. I mean, the Lions are one of those teams, especially at home, that will just absolutely pour it on. But I do think, you know, there is some juice to the Vikings side, specifically the passing attack. We were talking about it this morning. They throw a ton in the red zone. So that could be a little bit of juice for McCarthy. This also could be a game where, you know, first couple weeks when McCarthy was playing, they weren't throwing as much as the Vikings have historically thrown under Kevin O'Connell. But this is a game where, you know, they're huge dogs. They might be forced to pass. What do you think of the Minnesota side?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, every single Kevin O'Connell offense for the past like 3 or 4 years has just been top 5 in red zone pass rate. And yeah, we're seeing similar this year. I understand that a lot of the industry is kind of off of McCarthy just from the perspective of we saw him play not great for 3 quarters in week 1, not great at all in week 2. But like in hindsight, that week 1 matchup against the Bears, one of the easiest teams to run on. Of course, they were leaning on Jordan Mason. And the week 2 one was against the Falcons, who have made guys like Josh Allen look look mortal this year. So yeah, to me, if this were like a week 1 matchup, McCarthy would be extremely popular and very trendy. And we haven't really seen that big of a sample out of him. So yeah, I would like to lean into this. They're going to be pushed to throw. Lions have been a top 5 pass funnel by PRO allowed over the past 5 weeks. The double stack is very easy. It's just Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. The only note I have there kind of on the receivers is the Lions do play a good bit of man coverage, and Jefferson has been much more the go-to against man, up at a 0.3 target per route run against man this year. Addison just an 11% target share versus man. So I think I'm going to try, if I'm ever bringing this back in my Goff stacks, I'm going to try to get to Jefferson. That probably is possible with all the value that we've had opening up on the slate today. But yeah, that's just my only note, is I maybe counterintuitively prefer Jefferson to Addison.
Yeah, I think both are pretty viable if you are using a bring back on your line stacks. Addison has actually outscored Jefferson in 6 of their last 12 games together, averages just a hair over 17 fantasy points per game over that stretch. So pretty solid for a guy who's 5,800. I think both make for decent plays here. Got everything in that game. Let's move it on to the Los Angeles Chargers at the Tennessee Titans. Chargers are 9.5-point favorites here. Total is 43.5 on the injury front. No Hassan Haskins for the Chargers. On the Titans side, no Calvin Ridley. Chig Okonkwo is questionable. Graham, massive spread here. Curious what you think about Kamani Vidal at 6,300. Again, this is a loaded running back slate, but usage has been great over the last 3 weeks. What do you think?
Projects amazing. It's just a really good running back slate.
Yeah.
It's tricky because, like, I love this spot. Like, Jeffrey Simmons is the Titans' best player. He's going to miss another game, and we've been picking on Titans' run defense all year. They're giving up the 4th most rushing yards per game. They've given up 13 touchdowns already on the ground. Just an incredible spot for Vidal. He's just kind of in a tricky price range, man. Like, we've got, you know, a ton of running backs at the bottom now. We've got, you know, obviously JT and McCaffrey on this slate along with Bijan and Gibbs at 8K. I think Gibbs is, like, my favorite tournament play. We kind of like didn't really, you know, give enough to that. I know you mentioned Montgomery, but I think Gibbs at 8K is a very, very strong play. Just an amazing spot for this Lions run game. It's just tricky. It's really tricky with Vidal. Like, I know he projects well. I know he's probably going to score well. I just don't know if I'm going to play a whole lot of him in this kind of salary range. I'm going to be trying to go up and down, I think, at running back. I think Justin Herbert and double stacks make a little more sense. I think you can play Vidal in Herbert stacks, but I'm just going to keep playing Oronde Gadsden. I know we haven't had him on a main slate. Last week he went off But, he went off 2 weeks ago. He's just 5,300. I think until he passes Keenan Allen in price, he's still a pretty decent value. And he's not going to be played at all. I mean, this dude is just like crushing zone coverage this year. He's averaging 3.4 yards per route run against zone. That's fourth best among all players. There's only 3 receivers ahead of him. And the Titans, all they're going to do this week is play zone. They just traded Roger McCreary, their best corner. So I kind of like Herbert double stacks at low-ish ownership because, Jake, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think most people are going to be wanting to pay up for Allen and Mahomes if they're going up this high on DK.
Yeah, I think both Herbert and Vidal seem to me like guys who are also going to get pinched just by current salary dynamics. And I do like that call. Part of me does wonder, though, just how much are the Chargers going to keep their foot on the gas with the lead? This was actually something that we looked at this morning in our projections meeting, and they are one of the most pass-heavy teams when leading by 7+ points. So, that's certainly encouraging when it comes to Herbert. Ryan, my question for you regarding Justin Herbert is if we do want to play him, who are we stacking him with? I do like Gadsden. I think Gadsden is, priced up at 5,300. It does feel like a tougher click for a guy that most of us didn't even know who he was a month ago. But, I mean, if we pretended he was a $5,300 wide receiver, I think he would still represent a pretty solid value here. It's just tough when they have 4, really solid pass catchers. Anyone stand out to you on the Charger side?
Yeah, it might just be like the dynasty bro in me, just because I have been thinking about Oronde Gadsden for months longer than maybe some people that just play DFS have been. But yeah, 5,300 doesn't scare me off of Gadsden at all. Titans are a very cover 4 heavy team as well. Gadsden's at nearly 3 yards per out run against cover 4, leading the Chargers in efficiency against that shell. So I do like Gadsden. He will be in any double stack I play with Herbert. After that, I think it's pretty easy to just go to Ladd McConkey. He is only 6K, second in total targets over the past 3 weeks behind only Jamar Chase. We've kind of seen the Chargers change their receiver deployment in a way that very much benefits McConkey, where Keenan is really only coming on the field on like third downs, 3 receiver sets, like passing situations, high leverage. He'll still get his targets and all that, but Ladd is just on the field so much more. He's a very dynamic player. Quentin Johnston has like transitioned into just running clear out go routes for a lot of these past few games. So yeah, I think it's Herbert, Ladd, Gadsden to me. But I guess I will say that I'm of the opinion that Vidal is the best play in this game over the Chargers stacks. He's gets nearly a 65% efficiency boost by fantasy points per snap when he's leading. That is similar to like what Ashton Genty or James Cook sees. And so that's pretty exciting. Like we have seen the Chargers in a very trailing game script. He still played a ton. He's at nearly 17 expected fantasy points per game in the last 3 weeks. Like I think Vidal is a really, really good play with an incredible matchup. So he's going to be who I have the most of.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I will probably end up with the most Vidal, but certainly don't want to forget about Herbert and his stacking partners for tournaments. I do want to get a little bit contrarian with my Herbert lineups. Keenan Allen's route share has fallen off significantly, but QJ was a guy who, week 3, week 4, almost everyone was like, oh, QJ's the guy you want rest of season, and now we've all given up on him. Tennessee has been a little bit vulnerable to the deep ball, 13th most deep receiving yards per game allowed. So I think there's maybe a little bit of QJ juice here for tournaments, but obviously a bit thinner of a play compared to Ladd and Gadsden. Titan side here, I mean, Io Manor and DK both project okay. Graham, any love for the Titans? I mean, geez, it's been brutal with Cam Ward. This is one of the worst offenses we've seen in a while.
Yeah, no, just full fade. There's just better. If you're playing Chargers, you don't need a game stack. They could just destroy them. No, I don't think there's really any Titan I'm interested in. Their target shares have been so flat since Mike McCoy took over as well. I just want to point out McConkey, like Ryan was saying, is just 6K, but like the production and the usage is like low end wide receiver 1 worthy. I think he's the best value on the slate among receivers. I mean, over the last month, he's wide receiver 7 in points per game. He's seen at least 21% of the targets in 4 straight. I think he's a really, really strong play. It's tricky because Vidal is a good play like we're talking about, but I think McConkey is pretty close. Like they project pretty similarly too.
Yeah, McConkey does project very well. He's a top 10 wide receiver value for us, just a hair above Puka Nakua. Actually, the guy that I'm probably the most interested in on the Titans side, and not that I have much interest in really anybody, but if Jake Okonkwo sits, Gunnar Helm at 2,900 would actually project as a pretty decent tight end value. Super thin, of course, but 2,900, it is a bit of a different way to save salary on a slate where we have a ton of cheap running backs. So I do think there are a few interesting contrarian angles in this game, but yeah, really don't need to play anybody from the Titans side if you don't want to go that route. All right, let's move it on to one of the most fun games of the main slate. Indianapolis Colts at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Total here is 50.5. Colts only favored by 3 points. Also, largely a clean game from an injury perspective. I mentioned this when we were talking about the Lions, Ryan, but man, I love Daniel Jones. I love his pass catchers this week. These, both him and Goff feel like spots where we just have massive team totals. Sure, volume could funnel through the running backs. We've seen Jonathan Taylor score 3 touchdowns in almost half his games this season. But this just feels like a great spot for the Colts. Tyler Warren really stands out to me. Alec Pierce in particular stands out to me. I know you had a lot of interesting notes on Alec Pierce's matchup. Pittsburgh, we went into the season thinking this is going to be a great defense. Their bottom 2 schedule-adjusted matchup, or I should say one of the 2 softest schedule-adjusted matchups for quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. So, Ryan, I think there's a lot to love here with the Colts. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I am extremely into Colts stacks this week. Starting with the schematic matchup, the Steelers play single high at a top 3 rate. Daniel Jones actually leads all QBs in yards per attempt against single high this year. His deep throw rate goes up to nearly 13%, gets into the top 10. So we see the upside increase for Jones, more downfield shots. All that stuff is amazing. 3-point spread, high game total, just exactly what you would be looking for. And I think crazily enough, the best receiver to play him with is, I agree, it's Alec Pierce. He's at just 4,600. So it's very similar where the Pierce and Jones, everything I just said about Jones against single high applies to Pierce because he just is the Colts' #1 receiver against single high, as weird as that is to say. He's at nearly a 30% target share. That ranks 7th best among all wide receivers in the NFL. Over 4 yards per out run against single high. Leads the NFL in air yards per game against single high, despite the Colts having seen the 4th fewest single high overall. So yeah, Pierce is just an incredible play. He also dominates against the blitz, which the Steelers have been doing at a top 3 rate. So I really love Pierce, even as a standalone play, but especially in a single stack with Jones. You can definitely add a Michael Pittman or a Tyler Warren to that. I would probably lean Warren if I'm double stacking at 5,500. He has just been also more efficient against single high. Top 2 schedule adjusted matchup on paper for Warren against opposing tight ends. So yeah, all that stuff is really amazing. Daniel Jones will potentially be my highest owned QB of the slate.
Yeah, this is, I just think, a great week to play Colts, really lean into some of these more extreme Colts onslaught stacks, game stacks. Can't forget about Jonathan Taylor. He's priced up at 9,800, sort of an awkward price. It seems like everyone who's going to pay up this week is going to want to pay for Christian McCaffrey, who is projecting incredibly well across the industry. And, I'm seeing 25 to 35% projected ownership across the board for McCaffrey as well. Graham, I'm curious what you think about Jonathan Taylor at 9,800. He's a guy who scored over 31.5 DraftKings points 5 times this season. That's the 20th most all time. He's only played 8 games, still has 9 more to go. So obviously there's plenty of juice to Taylor, but do you think it's reasonable to pay up for him on the slate in tournaments?
Yeah, he's 20% of your salary on DK. It's a little closer to 18% on FanDuel. So even over there, he's probably a slightly better value. Yeah, I think McCaffrey probably projects a little better, but I mean, if JT is going to be sub 10%, then I mean, there's your entire argument. Yeah, I think Colts obviously project extremely well. I'm interested to see where Daniel Jones comes in ownership too. It's kind of like the Jared Goff corollary, kind of wedged in between those kind of high price and low price quarterbacks. He probably will be pretty low owned. The guy I want to talk about most though is Jalen Warren. I think he's 5,500. He's an amazing play on DK. Like him and Kamani Vidal basically have the same projection, and you're getting Warren at nearly 1K cheaper. The guy's just been awesome. I mean, he's RB9 in yards from scrimmage per game. They finally stopped messing around with Ken Gainwell and doing that whole thing. He's got 76% of the carries over the last 2 weeks. That leads all running backs. And yeah, this is a 3.5 point spread. Markets are telling us something that this will probably be a pretty close game. Colts probably lead by a score. They could certainly absolutely destroy the Steelers because, like you said, their defense has been so bad. But even in a trailing game script, I think I like Warren just because he's going to get so many dump offs. And again, he's just 5,500 on DK.
Yeah, usage for Warren has been really good. Other great thing with Jalen Warren is, and obviously this isn't something we talk about a ton for fantasy, but I do think it matters a bit with him. If I asked you who the most efficient running back this season has been, you'd probably say Jonathan Taylor, maybe Bijan Robinson, especially prior to Week 8. No, it's Jalen Warren by both yards after contact per touch and missed tackles forced per touch. Jalen Warren has been playing incredibly well this year. Only other guy that I wanted to throw out as a potential bring back on the Steelers side would be DK Metcalf at 5,500. Hasn't hit double-digit targets all season. The usage hasn't been great, but the Colts secondary has been among the weakest in the NFL, especially over the last 4 or 5 weeks here. So do you think this is one of those games where DK Metcalf could get going? And the Steelers are only 3-point dogs here. Their implied team total is pretty respectable, and it's because the Colts defense hasn't looked great. And we've seen the Colts offense really pour it on teams, score a ton of points. So this could be one of those games where Pittsburgh, gets down, say 14-0 in the first quarter, and all of a sudden they're like, all right, we got to start chucking it. Ball's going to go to DK Metcalf. Maybe a little bit of juice for Calvin Austin too, if you're 150 maxing, could throw him in as a bring back. Ryan, anything to add on the Steelers side before we move on?
Yeah, I do really like Metcalf as a bring back. I think he's probably good enough to be like a one-off GPP play as well, depending on ownership. But yeah, the Colts also don't get a whole lot of pressure, and that's actually been pretty important for Aaron Rodgers in terms of when he's actually throwing downfield this year. You can see just watching him whenever there's a pressure coming, or if he gets moved off and he has to escape the pocket, he just dumps it off to Jalen Warren or a tight end immediately. But yeah, if Colts are bottom 7 in pressure rate, we see Rodgers ADOT come up, Metcalf's yards per out run come way up when there's no pressure. So I do think this is, if there is a DK Metcalf spot, this is probably it.
Yeah, Metcalf is projecting really well in our stuff. We're a bit ahead of industry. Currently a top 6 value for us at the wide receiver position. So do you think you can use him as a one-off outside of game stacks, but certainly like him most in game stacks? Slightly less exciting game here. Atlanta Falcons, 5.5 point dogs at the New England Patriots. Total here is 45.5. Michael Penix back at quarterback for Atlanta. Big news on the New England side. No Ramondre Stevenson this week. Ryan, you're a resident Patriots expert. This has to be the week for Travion Henderson. I mean, it's been incredibly frustrating thus far, but no Antonio Gibson, no Ramondre Stevenson. It's Terrell Jennings and a practice squad call-up. We think it's likely going to be Dearness Johnson. This has got to be the week. I mean, it's a really good spot. Atlanta's defense has been tough, but New England has been a fantastic offense this year, favored by 5.5, pretty solid implied team total. This just feels like, I felt like I was trying to kind of psych myself out of the Travion Henderson play this morning on our projections meeting, but I think Chris Wacht, who does our projections, is right. This is just one of those spots where you don't overthink it. Play the guy who is the heavy favorite to get 70% of touches. What do you think of Henderson, rest of the Patriots here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I had the same reaction to you, which is I just don't want to believe in Travion Henderson anymore. My faith has been tested too much. But yeah, it's a really amazing spot. Falcons are a top three run funnel by PRO allowed, also allowing the 7th most yards per carry, 2nd highest success rate to opposing man gap concepts. That's what we have seen Josh McDaniels always use, but with Henderson as well, top 10 in man gap carry rate. So yes, it is a really good matchup. He should get all the work. I think your worst case with Henderson is that they just decide they want to lean into the pass even more if they don't feel good about handing him the ball off. That said, if I were to compare him to like the other value running back that's opened up, Kyle Monangai, I would feel a little bit better about Henderson. They're both pretty similarly great matchups, bit stronger of a spread here. I would lean to Henderson between the two of them. That's like the most endorsement you'll get from me. But what I really want to talk about in this game is that angle of what if the Patriots just say we're not going to run the ball with no Ramondre Stevenson? And if that's the case, Drake May is really, really fun for tournaments. So really tough on paper matchup. Of course, the Falcons have shut down basically everybody aside from Tua last week this season. But schematically, it looks really fun for May, where the Falcons specifically blitz out of cover 3 by far the most in the NFL. They do that on 22% of their dropbacks. That it's like over double the league average. And the cover 3 blitz is arguably the best thing May has done at beating it this year. He's up at a 135.8 passer rating, 25% deep throw rate, and a 0.89 fantasy points per dropback against the cover 3 blitz this season. All of those numbers would lead all quarterbacks. The most vivid example is the play in the Buffalo game a few weeks back where he hit Diggs on the run when he was scrambling around. That was against the cover 3 blitz. He can buy time if he needs to. He can get it out quickly against the blitz if he needs to. Gives these receivers on the outside chances to win one-on-one. Creates, again, a 25% deep throw rate. So I really like Drake May for tournaments. The stacking partners to me would be Kayshon Boutte and Stephon Diggs. Those are the guys that have done the best against the blitz, against cover 3 for the Patriots this year. Boutte also the one getting the most downfield looks, highest ADOT against cover 3 of any Patriots receiver. So I would narrowly lean Boutte over Diggs, if only single stacking. I think you can double stack though. And yeah, this is a really fun spot for me. I'm way more excited about this than Trevion Henderson.
Yeah, I do like that Drake May angle. I will say I think I disagree a little bit on Henderson versus Monangai. I think Monangai is pretty clearly my favorite running back play. We'll talk about him shortly here. Graham, anything else to add on this game? Atlanta side, it feels like everyone's lost a lot of faith after what we saw last week. Just a total disaster. But, at the very least, if you're playing Drake May, I think you could use a Bijan, a Drake London as a bring back. What do you think of this game?
Bijan scares me. It's not anything to do with him. It's twofold. It's the Patriots have probably the second best run defense in the league. Only the Seahawks have been better this year. And I'll just call a spade a spade. I think Zach Robinson is going to lose his job pretty soon. This offense is just way too predictable. I think the Falcons are kind of a full fade in this spot, unfortunately. It sucks because Bijan is so good and he's a great price at 8,700, but I'd rather play Gibbs. Can definitely, justify McCaffrey well ahead of Bijan this week by at least 3 or 4 points in terms of projection.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the way to kind of get off, or maybe get a little different with Trevion Henderson is pay up for Patriots defense. They're probably going to be 2 or 3% owned. They're overpriced relatively on this slate, but I think Henderson, Patriots defense, probably the best way to play the Falcons this week. I'm just completely off Atlanta.
Yeah, good call. Certainly on the Patriots' run defense. Certainly have been weaker on the back end, so probably would want to go London if you want to use a bring back, but obviously don't need to go that route. I think we covered everything here. Let's move it on to the Carolina Panthers at the Green Bay Packers. Total here is 44.5. Panthers are 12.5-point underdogs. Bryce Young is back from his high ankle sprain for Carolina. Ryan, this is an ideal game script to play Josh Jacobs. We have seen a little bit more Emmanuel Wilson recently, but I think that's largely been blowout related. Jacobs just crushes in these heavy favorite scripts, and the Packers love to run the ball here. What do you think of Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, so the argument for Jacobs is that he's at 22.4 DraftKings fantasy points per game over his previous 7 games that the Packers won by 6 or more points, not counting the past 2 weeks. But when we count the past 2 weeks, yeah, he's at just a 55% snap share. He's been limited by this calf injury. And To me, there are so many good running back plays on this slate that I would almost just rather not mess with this, because your ideal outcome for Josh Jacobs is the Packers completely roll them and he gets to play ball control. He gets all the touchdowns, right? Like, yes, we've seen that play out for Josh Jacobs before, certainly, but these last couple games when the Packers have gotten in control, that's been when Emmanuel Wilson comes in the game to try to keep him fresh, understandably. So he was limited so Jacobs has no injury designation, but was limited in practice every single day this week. That was the exact same thing last week when, again, he was just at like a 55% snap share. So personally, I will not be going there. I would understand why you'd want to, but I am off of Jacobs personally this week.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Only other guys that really jump out on the Green Bay side, at least in terms of projection, Romeo Doubs, Tucker Kraft. Kraft has just been absolutely awesome from a efficiency perspective. Does feel a bit overpriced at 5,700. We've been talking about him a bit as like this is Green Bay's version of George Kittle. I'd kind of rather just play George Kittle at $900 cheaper than go the Tucker Kraft route. Graham, I'm curious what you think of that. Any other thoughts on this game?
Yeah, it's tough on DK to get to Kraft. I do think he's a better play on FanDuel. He's just 6,200 over there. Bowers,
Yeah.
Warren, Gadsden are all more expensive than Kraft, so I like him a little better on FanDuel. I don't have much else on Packers. You know, they're probably just going to roll the Panthers. I do think Tet is pretty interesting, though, at 5,800. He's the only Panther I'm interested in this week. It'll be the Rico Dowdle show. Chibo Hubbard's just not even close to the same running back as Rico, but I don't think I can really play these Panthers running backs in this spot. Just a good spot for Tet, though. The Panthers obviously got to keep Bryce clean. That pass rush is really good, but Packers corners are beatable. They're giving up the 5th most yards per game to perimeter receivers, and like we've been talking about, they're big 13.5-point dogs. They're going to have to be thrown this whole game. Tet just got 41% of the targets last week, and I think he's going to be sub 5%. So I think he's a really, really interesting tournament play.
Yeah, that is a little interesting for tournaments. Just can Bryce Young find the time to get him the ball? And, 5,800, I do think that's an interesting risk worth taking, especially given the projected ownership there. All right, let's move it on to what is clearly the grossest game of the slate. Denver Broncos at the Houston Texans. Broncos are 1.5 dogs. Total here is 39.5. No Marvin Mims or Pat Surtain for Denver. Nico Collins, Christian Kirk are back for Houston. Dalton Schultz is questionable. Graham, anything to like in this game? It feels like this is a slate full of great games, great plays, excluding this game.
Yeah, wide open slate, and then we have this kind of piece of crap game right in the middle of it. Texans are the number 1 defense in EPA allowed. Broncos are top 5 defense that just lost Pat Surtain, but still have this incredible pass rush. I think CJ Stroud probably takes 6 sacks in this game, legit. This pass rush is just going to destroy this offensive line, and obviously Stroud holds the ball way, way too long. Really, the only interest I have here is Broncos defense at 3,900 and Texans defense at 29. Both make a ton of sense. I think this week, if you just kind of want to limit your player pool to one of those two, whoever fits your team, that's the way I'd go. And I'll be honest, I have no interest in really any of the skill position players on in this game. There's really I guess you can make an argument for Nico, but bro, Stroud again might have no time to throw, and he's still overpriced. He's a wide receiver 2 on volume.
Yeah, and that the other tough thing with Nico is we have a lot of great expensive wide receivers: Puka Nacua, Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice, Amon-Ra. Just tough to pay up for a guy like Nico Collins. And I mean, looking through our projections, no one in this game projects particularly well. I think the defenses are probably my favorite way to go. Ryan, anything to add before we move on from this one?
Yeah, not really. Just play the defenses, man.
All right, fair enough. Let's move it on to another fun one. San Francisco 49ers at the New York Giants. 49ers are 2.5-point favorites. Total is 48.5. No Brock Purdy for San Francisco. Another game of Mac Jones. This is a really fun game environment. It starts with Jackson Dart. He's 5,200. He's going to be the chalkiest QB of the slate. Pretty clearly the cash game quarterback. Graham, this feels like a great opportunity to play Dart. I guess my question is for tournaments, he projects great, is a cash game play, but for tournaments, Wandale, Theo Johnson getting some steam, who do we want to stack him with here? Because I do think this is a really fun game environment and one that I personally want to attack.
Yeah, I think Jackson Dart is my favorite quarterback on the slate, and it's not really close. Hitting his starts, guys. I mean, he's been the fourth most productive rookie quarterback of all time. I mean, seriously, 21.9 fantasy points per game. It's better than Jane Daniels last year in his rookie season. The floor has been high, the ceiling's been high, and he's just 5,200. Yeah, Wandale has a great matchup for sure. 49ers have sucked against slot receivers all year, giving up the third most yards per game. But he'll probably draw some ownership. Darius Slayton is currently projecting for like maybe half or even a quarter of that ownership, and he's just 4,100. And I think he would probably be pretty chalky this week if he didn't have a 70-yard touchdown called back due to a pretty ticky-tack offensive pass interference penalty last week. So I think Slayton's actually my favorite way to play Jackson Dart. I don't know if I'm doubling Dart just because he's got this, awesome design carry role in the goal line and in the red zone. It probably like kneecaps a little bit of these upside with both receivers, but I think you can make a decent argument that they're both pretty strong technical values. And then it's the easiest bring back in the world with Christian McCaffrey. I wanted to pick your guys' brain on Tyrone Tracy, though. It kind of feels like a trap. I don't know why. Maybe it's just like a gut thing. I don't know why. I mean, he projects extremely well. He's 5,100. Niners haven't been a good run defense all year, but for some reason I can't escape that it feels trappy, and I can't really put my finger on why. Maybe it's just because this running back slate is so good. I don't know. What do you guys think about Tracy? He's kind of been tricky to me, especially since we have Monungai, Hunt, Henderson now.
Yeah, Tracy's really interesting. Before we had the Henderson, the Monungai news, I ran some sims this morning. I was getting a ton of Tracy. Didn't really feel super comfortable with that, but obviously a guy you want exposure to because the workload should be really good. Devin Singletary largely dusted. The one key difference between Tracy's workload and Scadaboo's workload at the peak is that I think we're going to see a lot of this goal line work just go to Jackson Dart, which is another reason why he's a great play. Ryan, I'm curious what you think on Tyrone Tracy Giants here.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Graham in that Tracy's a technical value, like 7 of their 9 carries, only one inside the 10 last week after Scadaboo went down. Was seeing the target share. Like there's no like actual reason to point to that you can poke a hole in the workload or the matchup. But yeah, to me, I don't know if the upside is here that I want for tournaments. Yeah, I just don't have much else on Tracy. Like we have also seen him at multiple points last season kind of get immediately benched / punished for fumbles, which is something he's had issues with too. Like would not be surprised at all if suddenly Devin Singletary is playing mostly in the second half. Like all of these are like possible outcomes with Tyrone Tracy. So yeah, there's other options I like better that are as cheap or cheaper.
Yeah, right there with you. Certainly with all the running back value on this slate, do not need to play too much Tyrone Tracy here. 49ers side is a ton of fun. They've been a lot of fun for fantasy with Mac Jones at quarterback. This team is running a ton of plays. They're second behind only the Chargers in plays per game at about 65 and a half. Mac Jones is cheap. George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, and Jawan Jennings all projecting as great values. Ryan, I'm curious what stands out for you on the San Francisco side, because I think there's a variety of ways we can stack this up. I think you can play Jackson Dart and a couple guys on the San Francisco side. Could also play Mac Jones and a couple guys on the San Francisco side. So, yeah, anything stand out to you with the 49ers?
Yeah, you can definitely play Mac Jones. Both of these offenses are top 5 in pace. Giants are a top 4 pass funnel by P-Row allowed. So I could definitely see this game environment going off to a point where Mac actually outscores Dart if he just doesn't get the rushing touchdowns. That is definitely in play. So Mac is pretty decent. I do really like Jawan Jennings, even as a one-off play, as a way to save salary at the wide receiver position. He's at just 4,300. Yes, he's probably playing hurt to some extent, but each of these last 2 weeks, he's gotten in full practices every single day, or at least that's how he's been listed. So I have to assume he's getting at least a little bit healthier. And we've seen Jennings have a ceiling. So in 4 of his last 13 games above a 70% route share, Jennings has gone at 19.9 DraftKings points or more 4 out of his last 13. So that's a pretty enticing ceiling for a guy that's close to 4K. It is a good matchup in terms of the Giants playing a lot of man and Jennings being the go-to for the 49ers against man coverage this season, 30% target share. He's the only guy they really target downfield at a decent rate, which is where the Giants have also been very vulnerable, top 3 in deep receiving yards per game allowed. So Jennings is awesome to me. Mac Jones plus Jennings, and then Christian McCaffrey is a pretty nice stack. Not to like, I've spent a lot of time on Jennings. McCaffrey's an amazing play. He's an amazing play every single week. But especially this week, the matchup's great. My favorite stat on him was that the Giants are allowing the most adjusted yards before contact per attempt of any team, up at 2.9. McCaffrey has only gotten more than 2 yards before contact per attempt in one game this year. It was week 7 against the Falcons when he went for 129 rushing yards and 5.4 yards per carry. So, like, obviously the receiving work is always going to be there for McCaffrey, but he could be efficient on the ground in this spot too. So I really want to make sure I'm getting to plenty of him as well. And then you mentioned him earlier, Jake, but yeah, George Kittle at 4,800 does feel pretty strong. He's just always at the tight end position. His ceiling is pretty much unmatched, as we've seen over the past several seasons, especially in games without the Deebo Samuels, the Brandon Ayuks. So I think all these Niners pieces are good. Mac Jones is good, but yeah, Jennings is going to be aside from like obviously Christian McCaffrey, Jennings is a strong one off to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. George Kittle actually our highest projected tight end value right now over at fantasypoints.com. Christian McCaffrey, I mean, the workload is just amazing. It's about 25% better than the next best workload that we've seen since 2021, as far back as fantasy points data goes. He's a guy that could average 3 yards per carry and still get you 30 DK because the receiving workload is so damn strong. And then Juwan Jennings is a guy who, like these other two, projects really well, but I don't think you're going to see the field get to as much because of the injury uncertainty. He's, at least a few weeks ago was saying publicly that he was basically like Greg Jennings from the Madden video. Every bone in his body is broken, high-low ankle sprain, shoulder injury, 5 broken ribs. Realistically, he's not that beat up. That was also a few weeks ago, so he's had some time to recover. I mean, Graham, you said on our projections meeting this morning, if he had 5 actually broken ribs, the team doctors they're just not going to let him go. I mean, it's
yeah, bro. If you shatter your ribs like that, you're going to puncture a lung. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Real quick, I think Kittle is the best tight end play on the slate. It kind of clicked on a walk this afternoon. I was like, thinking about the slate, thinking about how, I mean, really, it's a good tight end slate too. We got a great running back slate. I think top of the tight ends are very good, but Kittle, I mean, Giants play a ton of man. Kittle is always crush man coverage. It just kind of seems a little too obvious to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Really, really strong projection that we have on George Kittle this week. Let's move it on to the Chicago Bears at the Cincinnati Bengals. Bears are 2.5-point favorites. Total is 51.5. Injuries on the Chicago side: no Luther Bird, no DeAndre Swift, no Roshan Johnson. Olamide Zaccheaus, Kyle Monungai are popping as elite values. Bengals side, Trey Hendrickson is doubtful. Joe Flacco, questionable. He sat out all of Friday's practice with an AC joint injury to his throwing shoulder. He did practice in a limited fashion on Thursday. He suggested to the media today that he feels good about playing. I believe it was Jamar Chase said to the media on Thursday that he would have had no idea Flacco was injured. So I'm expecting Flacco to play, but this is certainly a spot to look out for either tonight or tomorrow night. A Rappaport tweet, a Schefter tweet, giving us some additional details. Ryan, I think the difference between Jamar Chase being, arguably the most popular wide receiver play of the slate and merely being an okay 10 to 15% owned type of play is the health of Joe Flacco. I mean, this Chase usage with Flacco, 17.7 targets per game, over 31 expected fantasy points per game. Just absolutely incredible usage. What do you think of Bengals side, Flacco, Chase, all those guys?
So I'm a little scared to play Flacco himself just because of the injury question marks and everything. But I do definitely want to get to Chase. I think you can capture the upside through Chase most likely without needing to stack him. But yeah, over his last 3 games with Flacco, 17.7 targets per game, over 31 expected fantasy points per game. It's pretty insane. I do think Flacco's likely to play just because we've seen the spread narrow a bit to 2.5 points. That to me suggests that Flacco's probably going to play. So yeah, Jamar Chase, great play. Also, the Bears have been the most extreme slot funnel in the NFL this year. Most schedule adjusted allowed to the slot, fewest to the outside. That'll benefit Chase in that he is the one the Bengals will move into the slot at a decent clip. T. Higgins always just sits on the outside there on an island. So just, yeah, even like an additional note, possibly funneling some more volume to Chase. So yeah, really solid play. I do think Chase Brown maybe deserves a shout here. We haven't seen the workload really come up to where we would want it to be, but he's been really efficient over his last 2 games, over 7.8 yards per carry, 100 yards from scrimmage in each. And this is a really amazing matchup. Bears are, let's see, 3rd most adjusted yards before contact per attempt allowed. So yeah, I don't know that I'm getting to Brown just because there are so many other good running backs as we've been talking about. But yeah, he's kind of in that awkward 5,900 price range that could be interesting to look at. Maybe like as a bring back for Bear stacks or something if you want to get off of the Chase ownership. But yeah, just like it's kind of a marginal play I thought I'd mention.
Yeah, I just don't know how comfortable I feel going to Chase Brown. Like, you're not getting no ownership there. I'm seeing 8 to 12% across the industry, and I do think you can make a good efficiency case, but Samaje Perine worked in a lot more in week 8, 43% of snaps, 9 of 21 rush attempts, 12 of 24 backfield routes. This is a loaded running back slate. I think if the slate was a little grosser at running back, I would have some interest in Chase Brown, but I don't necessarily think he's a guy I'm going to get to. Probably mostly Jamar Chase, maybe some Joe Flacco doubles for me. On the Bengals side, Graham, Bears offense has a fantastic matchup here. Obviously, it starts with the Kyle Monangai chalk. No DeAndre Swift. Also no Roshan Johnson. This is a backfield that's averaged just under 22 fantasy points per game. Vast majority of that should go to Monangai, given that he's really only competing with Travis Homer for touches, and we've never seen Travis Homer earn a big workload. He, to me, is pretty clearly the best running back play on the slate. We'll see where projections and ownership end up, but I would imagine he ends up, right there with Christian McCaffrey in the 30 to 35% owned range. What do you think of Monangai, rest of the Bears offense here?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Monangai is the best at the bottom, and I'm hesitant to say it's not close, but it feels not close, to be honest, because this matchup is so good. I think Monangai probably projects maybe 2 points better, but I could certainly make a case to make him project like 3 to 4 points better. And it's a twofold thing. It's just like this matchup is incredible. Bengals have been the worst run defense over the last month, giving up the most yards per game. Monangai might also like be just as good as Swift. If you look at the efficiency numbers here at Fantasy Points Data, he's actually been better in yards after contact, better missed tackles forced. And then, yeah, I mean, Travis Homer has 1 career game with more than 10 carries, and it was exactly 10. Guys just like not played all year. He's basically just been their special teams guy. So it literally could just be all Monangai, and he's, basically stone men on DraftKings for all intents and purposes at 4,600. I think if we don't get Flacco, just to kind of cover this base, if we don't get Flacco, he's an even better play. I mean, they're 2.5 point favorites now. If Flacco's out, they'll probably be, I don't know, they'll probably get to like 4.5 or 5. In which case, I'd probably want to play him with Chicago defense just to get a little weird. But Monangai is, I think, by far and away the best value on this slate. And maybe this is why I've kind of soured on Tyrone Tracy, because like you, Jake, to start this week, I kind of liked him, but yeah, it just kind of makes a ton of sense with Monangai here.
Yeah, it does. I mean, just 4,600. This is a guy who could push for 18, 20, 22 carries. By far the best schedule-adjusted matchup on the slate for running backs here for Monangai. I'm also interested in Caleb Williams. That's largely dependent on Joe Flacco playing. I want to see a little bit of push from the Bengals side. And, they could give that push with Jake Browning. Jake Browning faced some tougher defenses. Joe Flacco's gotten the easier part of the schedule here. But I think with Flacco, this game has a lot more juice overall. And the Bears have leaned run heavy, and they probably need a few, Jamar Chase touchdowns or something along those lines to push them. Ryan, anything to add on the Bears before we move on?
I do want to give Colson Loveland just a little shout here. We don't know if Cole Kmet is going to play yet, but Loveland's still just at 3,300. Bengals, the best matchup in the NFL for opposing tight ends. I don't know. I think it's the total is strong enough that especially in Caleb Williams stacks, I think Loveland makes a lot of sense. I don't know if I'll get to him as a one-off, but yeah. And even if Kmet does come back, Loveland was already running more routes than him, especially on third downs, on passing downs. So I think he's in play either way.
Kmet is going to play. He has no injury designation headed into this one. I don't think I'm going to get to Loveland. I think if I'm going to double stack Caleb, it's going to be with Odunze and Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus projects really well at 3,300. We'll get to Parker Washington and Daimi Brown there. They're guys who project sort of similarly well at that sub 4K range, but with no Luther Burden, Zacchaeus should get a few more routes here, and he's just super cheap.
Yeah, I think the only Bear I'm interested in right now is Mononga. And for what it's worth, this line flipped. It was Bengals 3. It's now Bears 2.5. So we might not see Flacco. Bengals have a bye next week too. Just like I said, would make Mononga an even better play.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that does it for the 1 p.m. slate. Let's move it on to a 3-game 4 p.m. slate here. New Orleans Saints at the Los Angeles Rams. Total here is 43.5. Saints are 14-point dogs. On the injury front, Spencer Rattler not injured, just been benched. Tyler Shuck will start. Alvin Kamara and Rashid Shaheed both questionable here. Puka Nacua back for the Rams. Don't really think we need to spend much time on the Saints. Their implied team total here is just a pathetic 15 points. I'm really not too interested in playing anybody. Juwan Johnson does project as the best value among their big three pass catchers. We would see a pretty decent projection boost to Johnson, to Olave if Shaheed sits. Even then, I probably don't want more than 5, 6, 7% of either of those guys. Just a lot better value options. On the slate, market does not respect Shook. Doesn't appear like he's that good of an NFL prospect, given that, at least right now, he got beaten out by Spencer Rattler for the early part of the starts. For the Saints, more interesting side of this game, the Rams, Ryan, Kyren Williams, 6,800. He was projecting as chalk earlier in the week. I would imagine that's not really as much the case anymore, but these are still the spots that we really want to play Kyren Williams. A bit similar to Josh Jacobs. When the Rams win big, generally Kyren Williams ends up scoring, often multiple times. They're one of the most run-heavy teams in the league when they're winning. What do we think of Kyren Williams here?
I think he's okay. When he was looking like he was going to be highly owned, I was very against him, just because we saw in the Rams' last blowout in London, we saw Blake Corum come and out carry Williams 10-5 in the second half. We've only seen Williams go over 20 DraftKings points once this year, and it was in that shootout loss to the 49ers where Corum fumbled early and got benched. So I don't think Williams' ceiling is maybe all that great. It's really just dependent on, do the touchdowns in the first half of the game come on the ground or come in the air? The Rams have been throwing a lot more in the red zone this year, nearly a 60% red zone pass rate compared to 48% last season. So I wouldn't be that surprised if they just continue to lean into that. So yeah, it's a big spread. Williams is totally fine. I get him as a play if he's not going to be 20% plus owned, but yeah, not really a priority for me at all.
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised if he ends up at 20%. I think we see these sort of mid-range, solid running back plays end up getting pinched. I also think you'll see people want to go a bit more to Vidal, a bit more to Jahmyr Gibbs. Kyren Williams might be one of those guys where when the cards flip over, we're getting him at 10, 12% in some of these larger field tournaments, which does feel pretty good given the script. I think if he's going to be chalkier than that, I do start to lose a little bit of interest. We did see Blake Corum outcarry him 10-5 when the Rams blew out the Jags in Week 7. Graham, anything else to add on the Rams? Puka Nacua is among the best wide receiver plays on the slate at 8,500. Was basically top 3 in fantasy points data history in every receiving stat prior to his injury. Stafford is a little bit interesting here, but again, I'm just worried the Rams are going to take their foot off the gas. What do you think on Rams side?
Yeah, that'd be my concern. Rams just have such a massive advantage on defense. I mean, this front seven is just going to destroy the Saints. Saints are bottom 5 offensive line right now, and Rams might have one of the best, most diverse pass rushes in the NFL. So I'm a little worried about this game. There's so many good games on this slate. It definitely is a concern that Rams just get a big lead and not really do a whole lot in the second half. We've seen McVay, in the course of his coaching career, when they're ahead, they just lean on the run, slow things down. I think there's just better game environments on this slate. I wish Rams defense were a little cheaper because that's kind of the only way I'd want to go. I think in this game, Puka, he's 8,500, but Rashee Rice is 1K cheaper. And we'll talk Chiefs Bills here in a little bit, but I think there's a really good bull case for Rice being the best receiver play on this slate.
Yeah, absolutely. I was the one thing I will say regarding Stafford stacks is that I was a bit surprised when I ran some sims with our projections over in SaberSim this morning. I was getting a lot of Stafford stuff, so I think that's largely just the implied team total. Our projection's not particularly crazy, but implied team total here is really, really nice for Los Angeles. So might end up with a little bit more Stafford than the 2, 3, 4% ownership projections imply, but certainly not my favorite quarterback play of the slate. All right, one more game to get out of the way before we have the premier game of the slate. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Las Vegas Raiders. Total here is 43.5. Jags are 2.5-point favorites. Travis Hunter is on IR. This is Max Payne, me, Graham Ryan, pretty much everyone at Fantasy Points, except Scott Barrett, I think. We're very excited about Travis Hunter this year. It was going to be the second half breakout. I mean, we had it after the bye, and nope, non-contact injury in practice. We are robbed of Travis Hunter's greatness. No Tim Patrick also for Jacksonville. On the Raiders side, Brock Bowers is back. Graham, Travis Hunter's injury has opened up some compelling value options for the Jags. I don't necessarily think you can convince me to stack up Trevor Lawrence, but a few of his pass catchers are projecting pretty well. Parker Washington, in particular, is projecting as a really strong value. Damie Brown to a lesser extent. Curious what you think of those guys, BTJ, Jags offense here.
Yeah, if you just never stacked Trevor Lawrence ever in DFS, you would be massively, massively ahead. And I'm just going to continue to pound this drum. The guy just doesn't really have any upside. And this is a Geno Smith versus Trevor Lawrence game. Play it out in your head. Unless Geno has some Jameis Winston type game in him where he throws a couple picks and this game has a ton of play volume, I don't really see a whole lot of upside with it. My favorite play, and maybe my only play I'm interested in this game, is Parker Washington. I think he actually might be kind of good. Got 10 targets in his last game. And this is a really, really good matchup. Raiders have been terrible against slot receivers this season. Washington is going to line up inside all the time when they line up in 11 personnel. Obviously, they move BTJ around, but Washington will probably be on the inside in most of his routes this week. I like him and Jags defense. I mean, Geno has just been horrifically bad this year. You could make an upside case for Bowers because he's awesome. He's finally healthy. He's just 5K, but I think I'm more interested in George Kittle. That's kind of the way I've kind of sorted it out in my brain. I think especially if it's 1v1 in terms of ownership, right now it looks like they're going to both project to be 11 to 12%, then I just definitely straight up prefer Kittle. It's just give me the better quarterback.
Yeah, definitely want to second what you said, especially on Parker Washington. Just 3,700. He has 3 games this year with a 65% route share or higher. He's averaged 14.5 expected fantasy points in those games. That's a great workload for a guy of his price tag here. I do think there's a little bit of juice to BTJ. Our BTJ projection is pretty notably ahead of industry. Same thing with our Damie Brown projection. So can certainly dip in on these Jags receivers, but I think Parker Washington stands out as the best option. Ryan, I'm curious what you think of some of these Jags values and the rest of this game here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll first say I'm a little more bullish just on the overall game environment than it sounds like Graham is. These are two teams that are top 7 in terms of seconds per play. Both of them are these really extreme pass funnels where the Jaguars have been pretty hard to run on. The Raiders are the second most extreme pass funnel by PRO allowed. So there is like a world where this game shoots out. I'm not interested really in stacking either side, but I do think you can make the case for some like mini stacks. Yeah, Parker Washington plus Brock Bowers makes a ton of sense to me. But yeah, and like the only other note I have here on the Jaguars, I agree Washington is like the best overall play, overall value. It is like it should be an advantageous schematic matchup for BTJ. He's been the most heavily targeted Jaguar against cover 3, which the Raiders run a ton of. So that's my only real note there. If we move on to the Raiders, though, I do like Trey Tucker quite a bit more than projections or ownership might imply. So I just said why I like the game environment generally and why all that benefits him. But the Jaguars have allowed the second most schedule adjusted to outside wide receivers, the fewest to the slot, and the second most deep receiving yards per game this year. All of that just sounds to me like Trey Tucker at 4,800, where he's a guy who pops occasionally for a big game, big play threat, and then kind of goes away and we forget about him for 5 to 6 weeks, and then he pops back up again. That seems like a spot where this could happen to me. I definitely prefer like some of the other receivers on the slate, like an Alec Pierce, for example, that are priced kind of similarly. So I don't want to like oversell this angle, but I do think I'm not like leaving Tucker for dead. I will have him in my pool.
Yeah, I do like that angle on Trey Tucker. I think him and Brock Bowers are both pretty much the only guys that I want notable exposure to, or really any exposure to on the Raiders side of this game. Could maybe make a case for Geno Smith if we didn't have a lot of other, 5-ish K quarterbacks who were pretty strong values on this one. Let's move it on to the premier game of the slate. This is the reason there are only 4 p.m. games. This game kicks off at 4:25. It's the Kansas City Chiefs at the Buffalo Bills. Total here is 52.5. Chiefs are favored by 1.5. No Isaiah Pacheco for Kansas City. The Bills will be missing Josh Palmer. Ryan, I think most of the field's either going to want to pay down for, Jackson Dart, a Mac Jones, or they're going to want to pay up for a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes. And I'm always looking to pay up for Josh Allen in the weeks where we think he's going to be Superman. I haven't done this in a minute because the Bills have had some pretty significant spreads throughout the season, but this feels like one of those games. He averages 30 DraftKings fantasy points per game in the 7 games he's played against Kansas City since 2021. And this really isn't unique to Kansas City either. He has posted monster scores since 2021 in games with a spread that's within 3 points and a total of 49 or higher. Basically any big game, Josh Allen seems to just step up his usage, step up his rushing output, and really just step up his quality of play. Ryan, 7,300, this feels like a price I really want to pay for Josh Allen. I think the tricky part with the Bills is who do we stack him with? Although he is a guy that maybe you don't necessarily need a stacking partner. Curious what you think of the Bills side here.
Yeah, first I just want to echo that Allen is insane in these spots. So in 14 games over the last 5 years with at least a 50-point over-under, he's only failed to hit 30 DraftKings points in 4 out of 14. So like the ceiling and the likelihood of him hitting that ceiling feels much higher to me than his ownership is going to imply. So definitely going to be paying up to a lot of Josh Allen. And I think you hit on it. I don't think you have to stack him. In half of those games that I just mentioned where he hit a 30-point ceiling, he threw for less than 3 touchdowns. He's at like 50.4 rushing yards per game, 9.5 attempts per game. Also has run historically a lot more against the Chiefs. The Chiefs have been vulnerable to opposing quarterbacks on the ground this year. They gave up 54 rushing yards and 2 scores to Trevor Lawrence a few weeks back. So yeah, I do think you can just play Allen naked and bring him back with 1 or more Chiefs players on the other side. And part of the reason for that too is that the Spags and the Chiefs always play a ton of too high looks against Allen, and basically all the Bills receivers have negative splits against too high this season, whether it's Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid. If I have to pick one to stack him with, it probably is Shakir. He clearly looks the best in our projections. 30% first read target share over his last 2 games. He's only 5,300, so not going to break the bank. Like I think he's fine as a single stack. Maybe the upside isn't quite where you would want it, but I do think he works there. Yeah, I think that's basically the Bills side. It's pretty simple to me. I don't think you can go to James Cook here in a game that the Bills are underdogs. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I think we're sort of banking on the Chiefs falling behind a bit if we want to play James Cook. I mean, it'd be very contrarian, and it wouldn't project particularly well, but maybe him with the Bills defense, I don't know that I love that angle. The one thing that I will say on Cook is that the Chiefs have been a bit more vulnerable to zone rushing concepts. He's averaging 6.5 yards per carry on zone rushing concepts this year. That's about a 70 carry sample. I mean, he's just looked great. So, I get that it's not the ideal matchup. It's not the ideal game script, but I don't know. At least, I'm generally MMEing. I'm not going to end up with 0% James Cook. I'll probably have, 8, 10%, something like that, just because he's a guy that's going to go forgotten about. I think the mid-range at running back, like I've said multiple times on this show, is largely going to get pinched. People want to play McCaffrey. People want to play these cheap guys. And James Cook certainly does not project as an excellent value, but we know the upside is incredible with James Cook. Graham, curious what you think of the Chiefs side of this game in general. I mean, this is just a great game environment.
Rashee Rice is the best receiver play on this slate. I don't really think it's close. Projections obviously are going to have Puka and Chase at the top, but we're getting a 1K plus discount on Rice in terms of his price compared to the top on DraftKings. On FanDuel is even a bigger difference. His last 15 games as a starter, he's basically been the wide receiver 6. This year, he's averaging 24 fantasy points per game. That'd be, wide receiver 2, only behind, really Puka when he's healthy. So to me, in a game where the Chiefs are actually going to get pushed, I hear you guys on Allen. I think Mahomes has more upside, though. Like, they just smoked the Commanders. He scored like 25. They smoked the Raiders in 3 quarters. He scored 26. Both of those, he came just short of the bonus, threw for 286 and 299 respectively in both of those games. And now, we've got this spot with a massive total. Bills can 100% push and keep this game within a score, lead throughout the majority of the game. I think Mahomes is by far and away my preferred play over Allen. I think at his price, a little cheaper. You play him with Rashee Rice, who I think is the best receiver play on the slate. And you just say, hey, like Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, Mahomes as a slight favorite with an excellent stacking partner. Ryan, you said this, the only real argument against Allen is who do you stack him with? It certainly could be a 3 or 4 touchdown game for him, but all 3 or 4 of those touchdowns go to 3 or 4 different players. That's the frustrating thing with him. It's a lot like Lamar Jackson. With Mahomes, it's like, I just really want to play Rice. That's really it. To me, that's kind of the way I see it. Hunt, obviously, a very strong value. I don't know if you can play Mahomes and Hunt together, though. I think that feels like you're kind of, capping your touchdown upside a little bit. I was going to say Hunt is the best value on this slate before we got Kyle Monangai and Trevion Henderson. Now I'm pretty confident that Monangai and Henderson are both better plays than Kareem Hunt. He certainly has the touchdown upside, but very little passing, down a usage likely in this game with Brashard Smith cutting in so much. So I think you can just make a relatively easy argument that Henderson and Monangai are just straight up better plays.
Yeah. I mean, Kareem Hunt's kind of a gross click here. It's really just the touchdown upside. He's not a guy who's gonna rip off any long runs, but 17 carries, 50 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's certainly a reasonable stat line for Kareem Hunt. Only thing I wanted to add on Mahomes is, I think he's a great play too. I think both of these quarterbacks are great. I'd give a slight lean to Allen, but the one thing that stood out to me with Mahomes when I was just sort of looking through some of the data on him whenever the Chiefs' opponent has scored at least 17 points, he's averaging 28 DraftKings fantasy points per game. That's 4.5 fantasy points per game more than the next best slate-eligible quarterback. Both of these teams are underneath funnels, and as Graham said, he's an easier guy to stack. This Chiefs offense is a little more concentrated. So, with the underneath funnel nature of the Bills defense in mind, I think the double would, for me, be Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. Could also just go Rice. Another way you can play this game, and I was actually getting to a bit of this in Sims, which surprised me because normally Sims are almost always pushing me toward a stacking partner, but going Josh Allen, Kareem Hunt, and Rashee Rice, you might get all of the offensive production on both sides of this game, and then that really frees up the rest of your lineup to do whatever you want. Ryan, anything else to add on the Chiefs side before we get out of here?
Yeah, I just want to say I really like Allen plus Hunt plus Rice. I think that makes a lot of sense. And just Hunt in general, yes, while overall I think he's a worse play than Monungai and Henderson. He is like really elite leverage, I think, on the Chiefs in general, where if this is the version of this game where it's Kareem Hunt that is really rolling, he's led the NFL in carries inside the 5-yard line with Pacheco out last year. Bill's most extreme run funnel in the NFL. Like, there's a version of this game where Hunt is just hogging all the touchdowns to himself, and it like busts everybody's Mahomes stacks, and you just massively benefit by playing him. So that's like something to think about when you're building. But yeah, would agree that he's like the third best value of the really cheap running backs.
For sure. Got a comment in the chat about Brashard Smith. Brashard Smith is in like a Mecole Hardman, Kadarius Toney type of role. It's like very gimmicky. It's a lot of screens. They'll throw him passes. His targets per out run is like 0.42. Like, I mean, just unreasonably high. But I really don't think they trust him between the tackles. It's going to be Kareem Hunt. I know it sucks. Like, I'm sure we'd all like to see what Brashard Smith could do with 20 touches, but it's going to be Kareem Hunt between the tackles. It's going to be Kareem Hunt at the goal line. That's the role that you want here. And that'll do it for a Halloween edition of Cashing Points. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. Good luck in Week 9, and we will see you all at the top of the leaderboards.
What? Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.